Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take all those sources you share, articles, notes, research, and we really dig in.
Yeah, our goal is to pull out the most crucial insights for you. Kind of a shortcut to getting genuinely informed without having to sift through everything yourself.
We navigate that pile of information, find the core ideas, the surprising bits, and give you just enough context so it actually makes sense.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're tackling a topic I think many people wonder about. It's the inner game of money and success, as our main source puts it. We're exploring that connection, which can be pretty surprising, between your mindset, your beliefs, and what actually shows up in your bank account.
In our primary source today, it's excerpts from the audiobook transcript of Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. It gives a very specific way of looking at this whole inner-outer world connection.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to really unpack the core ideas from that source. How does your internal world actually shape your financial reality? And maybe more importantly, what does the book say you can do about it?
Okay, so let's start with the fundamental idea, the big premise right at the start of the source material. It basically says your outer world, what you experience, is just a printout of your inner world.
A printout, okay.
Yeah. The results you see, money, health, weight, relationships, whatever, they're just effects. The cause, according to this book, is inside you.
And that leads to this key concept the book introduces called your financial blueprint.
Right. It's described as like a preset program or maybe a default way of being when it comes to money. And it's lodged deep in your subconscious.
Okay, subconscious, so not something you're necessarily aware of day to day.
Exactly. And the source argues this blueprint isn't just, one factor influencing your finances. It claims it's the single biggest determinant. It's the main thing shaping your financial destiny.
Wow, the main thing. That's a strong claim.
It is. And it's used to explain things like lottery winners who get this massive windfall but lose it all really quickly. The idea is their internal blueprint, their inner container, isn't set up to handle or hold on to that kind of wealth.
Ah, okay. So the money comes in, but the internal setting is still on low, so it eventually goes back down.
Sort of, yeah. And the flip side is the example of self-made millionaires. The source mentions Donald Trump, how even after huge losses, people with that millionaire mindset or blueprint often rebuild their fortunes.
Because their internal setting is already programmed for wealth.
That's the idea. The source suggests most people just don't have the internal capacity, that right blueprint, to both create and, importantly, hold on to large sums of money.
Interesting. So how does this actually work? Is there a process?
Yes, the book distills it into a formula. It calls it the manifestation process. P leads to T, leads to F, leads to A, leads to R.
PTFAR. Okay, break that down.
P is programming. That programming leads to your thoughts, T. Your thoughts then create your feelings, F. Those feelings drive your actions, A. And finally, your actions produce your results.
Programming Tet's fifth. Feelings, actions, and results.
Got it. So the root is P, the programming. Where did the thoughts come from initially then? Directly from that past programming. That's the key. So in this view, your mind isn't just thinking freely. It's often a conditioned mind running based on those old programs.
Okay, that makes sense. Running on autopilot based on the past.
Precisely. And this is where the thermostat analogy the book uses really clicks. Think about your home thermostat. You set it to, say, 72 degrees.
Right.
And the heating or AC kicks in to keep the room temperature right around that 72. Right, it adjusts.
Yeah.
Well, your financial blueprint is like that thermostat setting for money. It's set to a certain level of financial success. And unless you consciously go in and change that setting, reset the thermostat, your results via that PTFAR chain will tend to hover around that level.
So even if you get a sudden boost, like the lottery win, the internal thermostat eventually pulls things back down to its setting. And if you have a setback, it works to get back up.
That's the core concept presented in the source, yes. Your results will gravitate towards your blueprint setting unless the blueprint itself is changed.
Okay, so this internal thermostat, this blueprint, how does it get set in the first place? Where does that initial programming come from?
The source says it's primarily shaped by programming you received way back, especially when you were very young, like a child. Those early years are super formative.
Makes sense. And who's doing the programming?
Your major influences? Parents, obviously, but also siblings, friends, teachers, authority figures, religious leaders, the media, your culture.
Yep.
Basically, everything you absorbed about money, wealth, and rich people as you were growing up.
Wow, okay, so it's coming from all directions. How does this actually happen? Does the book break down the how?
It does. It identifies three main ways this conditioning gets installed. The first one is
Yeah.
verbal programming.
Verbal. So what you heard.
Exactly. Literally the words and phrases you heard repeatedly about money, wealth, and people who have it.
Can you give some examples from the source?
Oh yeah, classic ones. Things like, money is the root of all evil, or save your money for a rainy day. Rich people are greedy. That's not for people like us. We can't afford it. Money doesn't grow on trees. You know the type.
I think we've all heard some of those.
Right. And the book's point is these aren't just harmless sayings. Heard over and over, they sink into your subconscious and become part of your operating instructions, your blueprint, often totally unconsciously.
Wow. Is there a story or example of this in the book?
Yes, a really striking one about a guy named Steven. On paper, incredibly successful, earning over $800,000 a year, but he was always broke, always stressed about money.
$800K a year and broke.
How? Well, they dug into his past, his programming. Turns out his mother constantly told him things like, rich people are greedy and you should only have just enough to get by. Any more is greedy.
Ah, so he absorbed that rich, greedy, bad message.
Deeply. So consciously, logically, Stephen wanted the money he was earning. But his subconscious had this powerful negative association learned from his mom, who he loved and wanted approval from.
And the subconscious one.
The source says emotions almost always beat logic in these deep conflicts. His programming essentially forced him to subconsciously get rid of money that went beyond just enough, because having more meant being greedy and bad in his programmed view. He was acting out his mother's verbal conditioning without even realizing why.
That's powerful. Okay, so verbal programming is one way. What's the second?
The second is modeling. This is about what you saw.
Saw your parents do with money.
Exactly. Your parents are main guardians. How did they handle money? Were they good managers, or was it always a mess? Spenders or savers? Did they invest, take risks, or play it extremely safe? Was money talked about calmly, or was it a source of constant fights?
So you learn by watching.
Pretty much. Monkey see, monkey do. Although the source does point out sometimes people react against what they saw. If your parents were extreme savers, you might become a spender, or vice versa. You either become identical or the polar opposite, often.
Is there an anecdote for this one too?
There's a funny one, yeah, about a woman who always meticulously cut both ends off a ham before baking it. Why? Because my mother always did it that way.
Okay.
So they ask the mother. She says, well, my mother always did it. So finally they track down the grandmother, and her reason, oh, my roasting pan was too small for the whole ham.
Oh.
Huh.
So the original reason was long gone, but the behavior, the modeled action, just kept getting passed down.
Precisely. It shows how we can inherit these habits and patterns from modeling without ever questioning the original logic or if it even applies anymore. The author also shares his own story. His dad was an entrepreneur, but his income was really up and down, feast or famine cycles. And the author found himself repeating that exact same unstable pattern in his own early business ventures because he'd modeled it until he consciously worked on changing that part of his blueprint.
Makes sense. Okay. Verbal programming, modeling. What's the third way?
The third is specific incidents. These are specific, often highly emotional experiences you had related to money, usually when you were young.
Ah, so like significant memories.
Exactly. Things that happened that created a strong emotional charge around money. These incidents can forge really powerful, often limiting beliefs.
This sounds like it could be quite intense.
It can be. The source tells a really poignant story about a woman named Josie. She was an operating room nurse, great salary, but like Stephen, she could never hold on to money. Always found ways to spend it or get rid of it.
And there was a specific incident behind it.
A very traumatic one. When she was 11, she was at a restaurant with her parents. They got into a horrible, bitter argument about money. Right there in the restaurant, her father clutched his chest and had a massive heart attack.
Oh my God.
He actually died right there in her arms.
That's awful. So for her...
For Josie, money became subconsciously powerfully linked to intense pain, conflict, and even death. Her blueprint basically concluded money agony. So her subconscious mind kept finding ways to get rid of money to avoid ever feeling that pain again.
Wow. And it drove her behavior without her consciously connecting it.
Right. The book even suggests her choice to become a nurse might have been, on some deep level, connected to a desire to save her dad, reflecting that unresolved trauma.
These examples really illustrate how deep this conditioning, verbal modeling specific incidents can go. It really forms the foundation of that financial blueprint.
Absolutely. That's the core idea of how it gets built.
So, okay, if this blueprint is so deeply rooted from childhood,
Hmm.
How on earth do you change it? It sounds kind of set in stone.
Well, the source argues it's not set in stone, but it takes conscious effort. It lays out a process. And the first step, maybe the most crucial, is awareness,
Just becoming aware.
becoming conscious, observing yourself, watching your thoughts about money, noticing your fears, questioning your beliefs, tracking your habits, looking at your actions and non-actions when it comes to finances. Basically, you have to start studying yourself without judgment, like you're a scientist observing a phenomenon.
Okay, observe yourself. What's next?
Understanding. Once you start seeing the patterns through awareness, the next step is to connect the dots. Write down how you think this conditioning has actually affected your financial life. What results have these patterns produced for you? Understand the cause and effect in your own life.
So awareness first, then understanding the impact, then what?
Then comes disassociation. This is a really important mental shift. You have to recognize that these thoughts, fears, and patterns are just things you learned. They came from outside you, from your parents, your experiences. They aren't the fundamental you.
Separating yourself from the programming.
Exactly. You realize, okay, that was my conditioning, but it's not my identity. And crucially, you realize that now, as an adult, you have the power to choose differently. You can choose new thoughts, new beliefs, new actions.
Awareness, understanding, disassociation, freeing yourself
Mhm.
from the past programming. Is there a tool for installing the new programming?
Yes. The source introduces declarations as a very powerful tool for this.
Declarations, like
But-
affirmations.
Similar, but the book emphasizes making them with more power and conviction. They're positive statements about who you choose to be and what you intend to create, stated emphatically out loud.
Out loud. Why out loud?
The idea is that spoken words carry a powerful vibrational energy. When you declare something forcefully, you're sending that message not just to your conscious mind, but embedding it into your body, into your subconscious.
Interesting. Does it suggest how to do them?
Yeah, it actually gets quite specific. It suggests placing your hand over your heart while you say them, and even touching your temple, your head. It's about creating a physical anchor for the declaration, making it a multisensory experience to really drive it home.
Physical anchor. Okay, so what kind of things do you declare?
There's a general pattern. You first consciously release the old way. Something like, what I heard about money isn't necessarily true. I choose to release that non-supportive belief. And then you install the new belief. I choose to adopt new ways of thinking that support my happiness and success. And a core one the book emphasizes is declaring, I have a millionaire mind, several times a day.
I have a millionaire mind.
Uh,
Okay, so it's about actively overwriting the old files.
That's the concept. And the book apparently provides very specific declarations tailored to counteract each type of conditioning, verbal, modeling, incidents, and also for each of the wealth files it talks about next.
Ah, yes, the wealth files. Let's get into those. What are they?
So after laying the foundation of the blueprint, the source introduces 17 specific wealth files. These are presented as the key differences in thinking and acting between people who become rich and those who remain poor or middle class.
17 different ways of thinking.
Essentially, yes. Think of them as 17 critical files or programs in your mental computer that dictate how you approach money and opportunity.
And the source is clear. This isn't about judging people as good or bad.
Right, absolutely. It stresses that point. It's not about inherent worth. It's about understanding different mental operating systems, different internal files. The actions people take and the results they get flow directly from whichever file they happen to be running.
Okay, so let's look at some key ones. What's wealth file #1?
Wealth file 1 is all about responsibility. It contrasts two core beliefs. Rich people, the source says, believe, I create my life. Poor and middle-class people tend to believe life happens to me.
Create my life versus life happens to me? That's a fundamental difference of perspective.
Huge. And this links directly to avoiding responsibility by playing the victim. The source identifies three main habits of victims. Blame, it's someone else's fault. Justifying, making excuses like money isn't important anyway. And complaining.
Blame, justifying, complaining.
And the book is incredibly blunt here. It calls these three habits financial suicide, because if you're blaming, justifying, or complaining, you're implicitly saying you have no power to change your situation. Taking 100% responsibility, on the other hand, is positioned as the absolute cornerstone of creating wealth.
That makes sense. If you don't feel responsible, why would you take action? Okay, what's wealth file 2?
Wealth file 2 is about your intention. Rich people play the money game to win. Poor people play the money game to not lose.
Win versus not lose. Sounds like offense versus defense.
Exactly. Poor people are often focused primarily on survival and security. Just making enough to pay the bills, maybe save a little. It's defensive. Rich people, the source argues, are focused on creating massive wealth and abundance. Their goal isn't just comfort, it's to be rich.
So the target is fundamentally different.
Completely. The book uses an example. Are you comfortable enough to go into a restaurant and order whatever you want, even the market price lobster, without even looking at the price column? That's playing to win.
Right, not just settling for enough.
The source uses the saying, if you shoot for the stars, you'll at least hit the moon. But if you shoot for the ceiling, that's all you'll get. Poor people, it argues, often don't even aim for the ceiling. They don't shoot at all.
Powerful analogy. Okay, wealth file 3.
Wealth file 3 is commitment. Rich people are truly committed to being rich. Poor people merely want to be rich.
Committed versus wanting. What's the difference there? Sounds subtle.
It's huge, according to the source. Wanting often isn't enough because, as we discussed with the blueprint, people often have subconscious negative associations with wealth.
Right, the rich or greedy thing, or fear of responsibility, fear of failure, fear it'll be too hard.
Exactly. So you have these mixed messages going out. I want to be rich. B-U-T. That but cancels out the want. Commitment means you decide unequivocally that you will achieve wealth and you're willing to do whatever it takes, legally, morally, and ethically, of course.
Whatever it takes. That's strong.
It is. The book includes a quote often attributed to W.H. Murray about how the moment you truly commit, providence moves too. All sorts of unforeseen help and opportunities start showing up that you couldn't have predicted. Commitment itself changes the game.
That's a fascinating idea. Commitment unlocks things. Okay, wealth file 4.
Wealth file 4 is thinking big. Rich people think big, poor people think small.
Think big versus think small. How does that play out?
This connects to what the source calls the law of income. Your income is in direct proportion to the value you deliver according to the marketplace.
Value delivered, okay.
And a huge component of that value is scale. How many people does your work or your business affect or serve? Rich people tend to think in terms of reaching and impacting large numbers of people.
Whereas thinking small limits your reach.
Exactly. The source argues that life isn't just about you. It's about adding value to other people's lives, using your talents to serve. Thinking small limits your contribution, which leads to being broke, and often feeling unfulfilled. Thinking big, aiming to serve many, leads to both money and meaning.
So it ties financial success directly to the scale of your contribution.
That's a core message, yes.
Okay, those first 4 are really foundational. Responsibility, playing to win, commitment, thinking big. You said there are 17 total. Can we touch on some of the other themes?
Sure, there are many other important distinctions. For instance, one file highlights how rich people associate with positive, successful people. They learn from them, model them, whereas poor people often associate with negative or unsuccessful people, which reinforces limiting beliefs.
Makes sense. Who you surround yourself with matters. What else?
Another is the willingness to promote yourself and your value. Rich people are generally willing, even eager, to promote their products, services, or ideas. Many others have negative feelings about promotion or selling, seeing it as pushy or unseemly. The book reframes it as enthusiastically sharing value.
So overcoming that discomfort with self-promotion is key.
Definitely. Then there's being bigger than your problems. Rich people tend to focus on solutions and see problems as opportunities to grow. Poor people often get overwhelmed by problems and focus on the obstacles, spending energy complaining instead of solving.
Problem focus versus solution focus. Got it.
A big one is being an excellent receiver. Many people are actually terrible at receiving compliments, gifts, or money because of underlying feelings of unworthiness. The source stresses you have to be willing and open to receive abundance. Giving and receiving must be in balance.
The receiving part is just as important as the giving or earning.
Crucial. Another practical file is getting paid based on results versus getting paid for your time. Trading time for money inherently limits your income potential. Rich people tend to create systems or have income streams based on performance and results.
Like commission, profit sharing, or business ownership instead of just a salary.
Exactly. Also, thinking both and instead of either. Rich people tend to believe you can have, say, a great career and a rich family life, or be wealthy and spiritual. Poor people often see things as mutually exclusive choices. I can have money or happiness.
Challenging those false dichotomies.
Yes. And a huge focus is on managing money well and focusing on net worth, not just income.
Net worth, okay. What goes into that?
The source lists 4 factors: income, obviously, savings, how much you keep, investment returns, how well your money grows, and simplification, lowering your cost of living. Managing all 4 is key to building actual wealth, not just having a high income that disappears.
So it's not just what you make, it's what you keep and grow.
Precisely. And this links to the file on managing money effectively, even when you only have a little. The book famously suggests setting up separate accounts: a financial freedom account for investments you never touch, a play account for fend spending, long-term savings, education, necessities, and even a give account.
That system sounds practical. It makes managing tangible.
It does. The principle is you have to manage what you have well before the universe gives you more, which leads to the file on making your money work hard for you, understanding passive income from investments or business systems, so you're not just treating your own time and effort forever.
Right. Moving from active income to passive income.
Then there's acting in spite of fear. Fear is normal, especially when stepping outside your comfort zone. Rich people don't necessarily have less fear, they just don't let it stop them. You act despite the fear. You learn to tame the cobra, as the book puts it.
Don't wait for fear to vanish, because it probably won't.
Yeah,
Act anyway.
exactly. And finally, perhaps encompassing all of this, is the commitment to constantly learn and grow. Rich people tend to be lifelong learners. They understand that to get to the next level financially, they need to grow into the person capable of handling that level.
Be the have.
That's the model the source uses. You first work on becoming the person who thinks and acts like a wealthy person. That leads you to take the right actions. And those actions naturally lead to achieving the results. The fastest way to get rich is to work on developing you.
Wow, so it really comes back to personal development as the foundation for financial success.
According to this source, absolutely. And it emphasizes that these aren't just ideas to ponder. For each wealth file, the book provides specific action steps, exercises, and declarations to help you actually install that new thinking into your blueprint.
So it's very action-oriented, not just theory.
Very much so.
Okay, so bringing this all back around for you, the listener. This deep dive into the core concepts from Secrets of the Millionaire Mind really offers a framework, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like a shortcut to understanding why financial results can be so different for different people. And it gives you specific things, according to this perspective, that might be influencing your own situation.
And it really drives home that changing your financial picture based on this source isn't just about finding the right investment or starting a business. Those are actions. It starts deeper.
Right. It starts with understanding your own internal programming, that blueprint, and then consciously choosing and practicing new ways of thinking and acting, using tools like those declarations and applying the principles behind these wealth files consistently.
So we've covered the core ideas from the source material you provided. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind.
From the blueprint concept and how it's formed, to the process for change and those key distinctions in the wealth files.
And the big takeaway really seems to be this powerful connection. Financial success isn't just external strategy, it's fundamentally tied to your internal world, your money blueprint, the mindset you operate from every day.
Definitely the core message.
So as we wrap up, here's maybe a final thought to chew on, building directly on what we've explored from the source. Now that you've heard about this idea of past conditioning shaping your financial blueprint, how might simply recognizing that potential influence change the way you look at your financial goals and maybe the actions you decide to take, starting as soon as today?